Hello, welcome to The Passion Project, a weekly podcast hosted by myself, Guru, and my friend Derek.
Hello.
And this is a weekly podcast where we bring in a different guest every week so that they can talk about a particular topic that they're very passionate about. It can be anything: animals, bagels, tag collecting, oil paintings of Justin Timberlake, anything. This week, our guest is Victor Sintchak.
Hey.
Hello, Victor. So how are you doing today, Victor?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm not doing good. I'm doing well. Yeah.
You can say anything you want, guys. Inside joke. So, Victor, what is your passion?
My passion is, real general here. It's music.
First, could you tell us maybe how long you've been interested in music or playing music, or maybe what was your first instrument?
Well, I started on guitar when I was in first grade. I was 7 years old, and I am turning 18 in a few days, so you can do the math there. I've been playing pretty long time. I picked up bass and percussion. I honestly don't remember which one came first. I'm pretty sure they were around the same time, but I have a resume with everything on it now, so I don't need to worry too hard about remembering. But I picked up bass and percussion, and then later I also picked up I technically didn't pick it up, but I also started taking private voice lessons and private music theory lessons.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. And right now in school, which instrument do you play? Instruments, sorry.
Well, actually, that's a funny story because I intended to play percussion in the symphony this year, but then that didn't fit in my schedule, so they put me in orchestra, and that's weird because there aren't really that many percussion parts in orchestra, and also there are no bass players. And when I say I started playing bass, I mean electric bass. So I didn't really have any experience on stand-up, but Mrs. Costello said, hey, we sort of need somebody holding down the low end. Would you like to play bass? And I said, I don't really know how, but she said, it's the same thing. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm starting to get it down a little bit. I'm learning how to bow because that's a whole, like, people who come from cello and violin and try out bass, they have to learn it's tuned differently from a violin, so they have to get used to that, but I have to get used to the actual technique of playing. I know where all the notes are, which is helpful.
And are you also in jazz band?
I am not, which is, it's a long story. That goes back to, I've probably told you the story, but I don't want to say it here.
Okay. Also, I'm just wondering, I've been playing piano for about 10 years, and then I took up violin in, I believe, 5th grade, but then I dropped it right before I entered high school. Derek, have you also played any instruments?
When I was younger, the elementary school I used to go to, you started with instruments in the 4th grade, so I started playing the violin, and then in Winchester you had to pay $400 to buy a violin instead of just renting one, and you had to come in an hour early to elementary school, so I didn't do it anymore.
Okay, and have you ever done choir or something like that?
Yeah, I did choir all through middle school and high school, and I only stopped because I was afraid of Miss Grace.
You stopped because you were afraid of Miss Grace?
I stopped because
I've heard
I
so
was
many
afraid
stories
of
about Miss
Miss
Grace. We're not talking about there are two Miss. Well, there were
Not
two
the
Miss.
computer.
Yeah,
not the computer
yeah,
one.
right
I
now
know.
there's a computer. The head of the tech department is that Miss Grace. There was a former choir teacher, Miss Grace, who
I hope she never listens to this.
We've heard many stories. But yeah, and could you maybe talk about who's maybe fostered your passion or some major influences in your life?
Well, I definitely need to give a shout out to my parents, because if I didn't have their support, I would not be able to do all the different things I do, because I haven't put down any of the instruments I picked up, and that's sort of why I'm hesitant when it comes to picking up new instruments, because I don't like putting things down. So I still take, every week, I have a bass lesson on Monday, then Tuesday I have a voice lesson, and then I play in a percussion ensemble. Wednesday is my theory lesson. Thursday is my day off to handle homework and panic about school, because it's hard to do that when
That's every day, Victor.
Yeah, but Thursdays specifically, specifically for that. Like when we have a Spanish vocab quiz with 136 words on it, I get to freak out tonight about that. Friday after school, I have my guitar lesson. Saturday, I have my percussion lesson, and sometimes I'll practice with a band. And then Sunday, I will practice with a band usually. And actually, up until the end of last year, I was always playing with a band after my guitar lesson on Friday nights, but that sort of fizzled because Justin Siegel went off to college and he played drums with me and all those groups.
Yeah, I know Justin too. He's a great kid. And I was also wondering because you've also participated in Battle of the Bands for the past few years.
The last 2 years, yes.
Okay, and what's it been like participating in that competition? Like how far have you gotten and such?
Well, let's see. The first year I was just in Costicality with Justin Siegel and Justin Blundell, and I remember we were really pissed because we got put on the list to go first, and everybody who signs up for Battle of the Bands knows that nobody's there at the very beginning or the very end. So the front and the back end of the program, they're the worst slots to have. So we were pretty mad about that. I was actually sort of surprised we were the only three-piece band because the way the voting works is every member in your band gets a ballot. So you get a vote for yourself. So bands that are bigger automatically have a greater chance to move on. And also, if you have a bigger band, you're likely to bring more friends because there are more people in the band. They can all bring their parents, siblings, and such. So we just barely slid through onto the second round. And we didn't make it to the third round, but it was still nice to play in that. Although actually last year there was a major improvement in the whole sound system because previously they would have bands share equipment with each other. Like some bands would pitch in PAs, others would pitch in drum sets and stuff like that. And you would be assigned one or two bands to share with. And that I know that Justin Siegel did it the year before I did it, and his band's PA didn't work when they had to play because they borrowed it from somebody else and it just went sort of badly and they didn't make it on. But are you familiar with Meridian's Guitar Shop?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Emma, his daughter, was with the youth center last year because they're the ones, it's Rock for Youth, they're the ones who organized the whole thing. And she decided she'd get her dad, she'd get her family members who are professional musicians to run the sound, and that was honestly, I think it's probably the best sound that I've ever gotten as a bass player. I don't know if I could say that about everything else, just because the town hall isn't the best acoustic space. Like the shape of the room, all the sound just goes up to the ceiling, so they got the low frequencies to carry really well, but like as far as hearing words of singers, that didn't really work. But it's still way better than when kids were bringing their own equipment, because sometimes kids would have like monitors, which you're supposed to use to hear yourself. They would take monitors and point them out towards the audience and put them on chairs. And they're also at the same level as the audience. So you have sound just hitting like 5 people in front of the crowd and nobody else can hear what's happening except maybe the drums. So it's an evolving thing, and I'm not sure if the Meridians are going to come back this year because I know Emma graduated. But and I should talk about this last year I was in 2 bands. I threw together Seagulls with Seagulls pretty quickly, and then we put posters everywhere.
Yeah, for anyone last year, the poster of just our friend Justin Siegel. Seagulls were everywhere, and I remember, I believe it was like right next to or right below the Mr. WHS poster. It was like,
it was above it.
It was above it. Okay, sorry. It was like a giant version of that Seagull with Seagulls poster.
In color too.
In color. Oh yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah, so we did that, but the other band I was in, we were in the competition as serendipity because I sort of just sit in with that band like I wasn't really a part of it. They were just like, oh, we need a bass player. Will you play bass with us? Because they had a bass player who graduated high school and went off to college. And I said, sure, I'll play bass. because I knew the kid on drums, and they've changed their name to OK now, and yeah, make a face. But
I'm just saying some of the
Are-
band names. I'm just kind of like,
it's hard to come up with band
Real-
names.
I mean,
Okay.
are they okay now?
what?
Yeah, thanks.
Derek. No, but I'm okay. So okay, not
They
to,
would appreciate that. Though. They would
I
that.
appreciate seagulls with seagull, but like also.
Everyone, I came up with that. Everyone else in the band hated that name.
Oh really? I
Yeah.
like it. I don't know why.
Everyone else in the
I
band
like
hated
it. I
that
think
name.
it's
It's
kinda-
just because I had the registration form in my hand and it was due the next day, and I kept calling everybody for names. And Justin and Zach kept calling the names that each other were coming up with stupid, and Sabrina was like, I don't know how to come up with band names. And I was like, we're Seagulls with Seagulls. Because I had the form. I had power in my hands.
I think the group that won was it spell checked?
They didn't win. Insight won.
Insight won. But just saying spell check. It was
They're also...
they're
outcasts because they were the only band that made it to the second round that didn't have an S name. All the other names this year started with S.
it's all a name.
There was Seagulls with Seagulls. There was Swagmaster Flav. There was that one. Spell checked. So they were all S names, and there's just Insight. It's like, really, you gotta ruin the whole thing we had going there by accident.
Interesting. I was gonna ask about just some of the various genres you've worked in, because obviously, like I think just for me as someone who's really into films and also like writing, I like to sort of, it's just a personal thing, but I like to like diversify myself and like sort of delve into as many genres as I can when I'm like doing projects and stuff. I'm just wondering for you, also speaking of films, for anyone who didn't know, Victor was the one who composed the original score, composed and performed the original score for my documentary Hyper. We'll get into that later. But I'm just wondering for you, like, what are the various genres you've sort of worked in? Maybe if you have like a favorite.
Well, I got into everything through mostly rock and roll, because back when I picked up guitar, well, actually, the things I learned on guitar originally, I learned a lot of Bob Dylan and stuff, because all of his stuff is like 3 chords. His whole concept is like 3 chords and poetry over it, and sort of just interesting song structure rather than interesting harmony, which is, it's gotten him pretty far. He just got that. The
Pulitzer, right?
Yeah.
I think it was like a version of like the Nobel Prize for like I don't
For
think it was a Pulitzer.
for literature. Oh yeah, I think it was a Nobel Prize.
Oh, okay, yeah, my bad. But yeah, continue.
But yeah, so that got him pretty far. So I learned that stuff originally, and ever since I was in, I want to say even 3rd grade, I've loved The Killers. They're one of my favorite bands. And I wasn't quite good enough to get a lot of what their guitarist was doing back then, but I still listened to them a lot, and it's definitely influenced where I've gone over the years. But also just taking all these different music lessons every week. All my teachers expose me to different things. I've been doing a lot of jazz lately, especially when I went to Valencia. I had signed up for a rock group, but then we were playing songs that I had already played like a million times. So I was like, oh, I should probably do something different. So I went to the office and I asked if there were any other ensembles that needed bass players. And I actually found a kid, because they didn't coordinate everything, so every ensemble had a bass player. There were some ensembles that still needed bass players. So I went and talked to all the bass players, because we had a class that was just all of us. And I asked them all if we could go to the main office and figure out where there were still bass players needed. So I ended up in that whole process moving into a jazz group. And because it's Spain, we ended up playing a lot of things in like a bossa nova style, or sometimes a samba, like just different Latin influence things, which was, it was nice because I haven't had too much exposure to that. And I've played a lot of jazz sort of in isolation with like backing tracks or along with recordings and stuff, but I finally got to play in a band, and that was nice. And of course I've been exposed to classical through all the percussion and stuff I do.
Yeah, and I was also wondering, just for I mean, like, I know this personally, but for everyone listening, could you explain like what was this program in Valencia and like how you sort of got into it, how like when was it and so on?
Sure. So I don't remember exactly when, but I heard that Berklee College of Music has a campus in Valencia, Spain, and I was like, well, that's awesome. I want to go there. And then I ended up, I couldn't tell if I wanted to go or not, but then I decided, like, of course I want to go because I'm not going to be under the wings of my parents with their money to fund me going over there much longer. So I decided, yeah, I'll go over there. And the way it ended up working out was we rented an apartment just like 3 or so blocks away from the campus, which was cheaper than their dorms. So I stayed with my parents because my parents wanted to see the city. And it was a 2-week program. I think that they call it like the 2-week Valencia, Spain summer performance program. So it's mostly centered around just playing music live with other people and getting sort of the whole concept of working as a team, because when you're in a band, you need to communicate with each other well. You need to really have a good understanding of what all the other people are doing at a given time, and that'll help you convey music as a single unit better than, like, you won't sound like a bunch of random people playing together. And I thought that the program did a really good job of that, and also outside of the classes too. There were so many good musicians there. It was really easy to just talk to people. They had some things like open mics. You could just talk to someone in the hallway, like catch them after class and be like, hey, I heard you earlier and I liked what you were doing. Would you want to collaborate on something, or would you want to play with a group of people? We could go find a drummer and a sax player, because that's the other nice thing, is the diversity of instruments. Because, like, here in Winchester, the most diverse band that I've played in had piano, drums, I was on bass, cello, clarinet, and that was like a professional pit band. So that was like all people being paid to assemble. But at Berklee, since people come from sort of all over the world to just play music, you find people who play sort of whatever instrument you would need to find in an ensemble.
And are you still in touch with like any of the people you met there?
I collected a bunch of, I'm not on social media, so I collected a bunch of emails, and I sent out a big email, and I got a few responses. Not as many as I was hoping, so maybe I'll shoot another thing. But I also know that I tried to schedule studio time a few weeks ago, and then the guy, when I got there for the studio time, he said, oh, it's a good thing I saw it. Your thing went straight to spam. So that made me think it maybe just went straight to spam on those other people's emails, and maybe I'll send it to them individually or something. But I am still in touch with, there was one kid named Sebastio who was a singer-songwriter, and I liked a lot of the stuff he wrote. He also liked the stuff I wrote, and I've been busy with college applications and everything, but as soon as that clears up, I'd love to send him some of my stuff, because he sent me a recording of one of his songs.
I'm just wondering, because why are you not on social media? Like, obviously, you don't need to be on like everything. Even though I myself only have a Facebook, but I just feel like at least for you, in terms of sort of promoting your music or like sort of putting yourself out there, or is it just because you just don't want to get distracted with all that stuff?
Well, one of the reasons is not getting distracted, of course, but the other thing is I don't like how, I think it's good that you like just have a Facebook, because if you get too spread out, it's too complicated to keep track of everything, and then it's impossible for people to get in touch with you, because you have to be constantly maintaining and checking all those different sources. I sort of use my YouTube as my way of promoting myself, and I haven't used it outrageously much for a while, just because school's been busy. I've been focusing a lot on getting into a good school, because if I get into my top pick, I'll be right in Los Angeles, and that's a perfect place to make connections in person.
Just to go back to one other thing we had talked about, the genres, I was wondering, uh, Derek, I don't think we know a lot about each other's music tastes. And I think music taste is actually very interesting because it's so varied for a lot of people. And for you, what is your favorite genre or genres of music, or like favorite musicians?
Well, for me, it's weird because I literally like every kind of music. I mean, jazz is the sort of thing that you need to have an ear for, and I probably don't have the ear for it, but I am the kind of person who can listen to most anything, and I wish I could pick a favorite genre, but they're like all good. I kind of don't like the newer pop music stuff, but I don't know. Just about anything's good for me.
Yeah, for me, I'm like the weird one in like all my friend
You
groups.
you listen to movie soundtracks.
Yes, exactly. I listen to all film scores. I guess sort of my favorite film composer would be Hans Zimmer, who's known for The Lion King, Gladiator, Inception, so many other countless.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, exactly. So many countless classics. He's just amazing. But yeah, I listen to film scores all the time. I mean, I listen to like other songs too, but
Yeah.
like it's mainly just movies. Though there are some films like you know how like some films don't have the instrumental score, they'll have like other songs and that makes up the soundtrack.
Yeah.
For example, like Pulp Fiction, like any Quentin Tarantino movie, or Guardians of the Galaxy would be a more recent example. A lot of those movies then introduced me to other forms, other songs and other artists. And I was, but since we're on the topic of like sort of films soundtracks, Victor, maybe we could talk about sort of like our collaboration with
Sure.
how you like sort of the process we went through for making the score for Hyper. For anyone also to go back to your YouTube channel, if anyone wants to listen to that score, please go on YouTube to Victor's Guitar. Just find it on YouTube. You can listen to all the tracks there. He did a phenomenal job with it. And just maybe talk about like sort of the process we went through and everything.
Sure. So, I know you were sort of asking me that back with genres and stuff, but I'm honestly not quite sure what genre I would peg it as because it's not the most conventional thing to write on a marimba, although I've noticed that for some reason in documentaries lately, people really like mallet percussion instruments like bells, vibes, and marimba, so maybe it's catching on and I'm just part of this new wave of composers. But my main process for writing the music for that, I sort of tried to harness what the topic of the documentary was, which I sort of felt like, I know you focus on a bunch of specific issues, but the overall thing is stress and hyper-competitiveness within Winchester High School. So I just sort of tried to embody that sort of mindset and try to put it onto the instrument, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I mentioned in a lot of the conversations we had, I really wanted the music to sort of emulate the feeling of like what it's like to go to high school. And if you listen to the music, it's ends up being a bit at times very chaotic, at times sort of like stressed and emotional. And again, I would definitely recommend everyone look it up because he did such a great job with it. We also had a very unconventional approach to like how, like sort of like the process we went about, because
Yeah.
I didn't get to show Victor the full movie before he composed all the tracks. I shared with him a couple of the interview clips, and then I gave him other notes as well, and then from that he was able to like make the full score. And then when I was doing the rough cut, I had Victor come into WinCam, and we basically did some sound mixing together and put that all together. But yeah, it was great collaborating with you. So
Yeah, and I think it worked out pretty well because if, like, usually what people will do, like, the way it works is they'll get sent something from whoever's making the film and then they'll write to that, and you having me come in and edit it with you, that accomplishes the exact same goal of having everything line up properly.
yeah, I mean, granted, it's not like most times. Almost every time it's like someone, the director or whatever, like they send the film to the composer and then they'll like compose the score off of that.
Yeah.
But I've heard stories of many composers. I think like even Hans Zimmer, he wasn't given any of like the film for like I think it was like Inception or Interstellar, one of those movies, or maybe both of them. He was just given the script and he made the music off of that. So, but maybe we're the next like Chris Nolan, Hans Zimmer.
I was actually listening to I told you a couple weeks ago in my
I'm
bass.
kidding, people. I'm not that talented.
But the other week in my bass lesson, we were looking at Hans Zimmer, and I told Guru, and that made him pretty happy. But then last week, I asked my bass teacher if he wanted to pick it up again. He said sure, and actually we've decided we're gonna work all the way through the Inception soundtrack. We're gonna analyze the whole thing. But we were analyzing his piece Time, and we noticed that the rhythm that he chooses is actually, is it a palindrome? Is that a word that you can spell the same forwards and backwards?
Exactly.
The rhythm he picked was like that. Like if you read the rhythm backwards, you'd get the same rhythm as you read it forwards. And also the way he moves the harmony around, he's sort of it's sort of weird, but my bass teacher noticed that it sounds like an augmented scale, which is built entirely out of, like, it comes from the whole tone scale, which is all whole steps. It's a symmetrical scale, which is unusual, but he has this symmetrical rhythm and a symmetrical scale, and then my bass teacher was like, wait, and look at the picture, and the picture that was set just on the YouTube screen for the video, it's sort of a reflection with planets and everything. And I said there was no way that he didn't do that on purpose. Like, that's crazy sophisticated.
This is probably one of the first things you talked about, but I sound so ignorant saying this. I don't know what it's called, but like that main song that like goes with the commercials and that is like the one everyone recognizes. I don't know how to describe it, but have you heard that it's like, do you know the song La Vie en Rose? I think they put it in the movie too.
Yeah.
It's like that, but backwards and slowed down or something.
I don't know.
I remember I like watched a YouTube video that was like, listen to this song, and I mean I've heard the song before. My mom always used to listen to it, and it was so weird.
Wait, is it called La Vie?
La Vie en Rose.
Okay, I thought it was called something else. But no, I know that song.
Yeah.
I'm honestly really appreciative that Guru let me work on the project because I haven't had that sort of opportunity to write music for somebody for a project like that before. So I took a class when I did the Berkeley 5-week program 2 years ago, and it was called Scoring Visual Media. And I remember on one of the last classes, he was talking about like how everyone thinks there's some secret or some formula to get into the business of scoring like video games or movies or whatever you want to be writing music for, whatever kind of visual media. And he said the trick is you just got to dive in. Like you just got to find something and write music for it. He said if you have a friend who needs music for something, you can do that. He said, or even if you just want people to see what your work sounds like, you could just find some little clip of whatever you want on the internet and take the music out and then put your own music in and then put it back up and be like, I wrote the music to this. So then people have an idea of what your work will look like if they ask you to work with them. So it's a way to promote yourself. You just need to find a place to start.
And I was wondering also, when you're in college or like out of college, like what if there's a specific type of composer you'd like to be, like maybe a film composer, like orchestra or something like that, or like what would you want to, like, or conductor, sorry.
Well, until pretty recently, I was just thinking I wanted to be a performer. Ever since I picked up guitar, I was pretty sure it's like the whole thing. Every little kid who picks up guitar wants to be a rock star. That's where I started, of course, but I've moved away from that. At first, I moved after I got to play in the pit band I told you about earlier. I decided that I could maybe do that for a living because I know pit bands, they're a pretty good source of income. But then after writing the music for your documentary, I've been considering more maybe writing for movies, or I could try writing for video games sometime. Just because I've had my eyes opened a little more. It's the same thing like trying to expose yourself to different genres, to different outlets of music. It's always a good thing because I've also heard from a lot of professionals and also just people who have graduated from prestigious music schools that the more different skills you have, the better off you'll be, because the people who write for movies are sometimes the same people who go out and play at a club later that night. And you can make a whole income based off of playing music instead of having to have a day job. Your day job could be some sort of music-related thing. It's just going to be a different thing than what you're doing at night.
I can just imagine that in the future. It's like you wake up in the morning. You, Victor, I mean, wake up in the morning. You go to some studio to conduct a score, and then you go have lunch, and then the latter half of the afternoon you go to some other company to make the score for a video game, and then at night you just settle into a jazz club and just serenade everyone there.
I think it's interesting to see how music has evolved because throughout history, music is something that's present in every culture across the world, and some put more importance on it than others. But you can see how, we've gone from, I don't even know what the first instrument humans made is, but like there's all these different kinds and made out of different things, and we've gone to the point where like we can like electronically make things, and you have a career where you can literally do what you love and like make music, and people don't realize that they hear it everywhere and how important it is, but it's awesome.
Well, that's actually it's great, but it also causes problems because the whole thing about demand for music and musicians has gone down so much. People take it for granted because it's everywhere, and with technology and iTunes, like, it's great that music is everywhere. You go into a coffee shop and there'll be music playing on the radio, or you're going for a run, you can just plug in your earbuds to your iPod or your phone and listen to music there, and it's like, that's great, but at the same time, people have been taking it for granted lately, and they don't want to pay as much, and that's part of the reason people can't just be performers anymore. That's why you need to acquire a lot of different skills. I feel like I'll hopefully be fine because I'm working pretty hard to pick up a wide skill set, but it's interesting because it's great, but it's also sort of bad.
I think though, like, even though that's true, it's sort of like the decreased demand for, I guess, performers and stuff. Do you have to?
I have 2 minutes.
Okay, I was gonna say that I think, regardless of sort of what sort of the state of music that we're in, music always sort of has that eternal. How do I phrase this?
It transcends
Yeah,
our
basically.
language because
Exactly.
it is a language in and of itself. You don't like someone in China can write a score and you know exactly what they're trying to say.
Derek, yes, exactly. And I think even though, like, it's not like, yeah, exactly what you said, it transcends language, because like, even if you can't understand what someone else is saying, you can understand the music.
Yeah.
Or even from like movies or something, like, you may not remember scenes or anything, but if you hear like some notes of the score, all of a sudden everything comes back to you. I think that's kind of interesting. Last thing before you have to go, is there any advice you'd give to sort of aspiring musicians that may be listening to this right now? Sort of like, what tips, if anything?
Well, first I'd like to say I'm honored because I feel that I am an aspiring musician. But I would definitely say that if you're just starting out and people keep telling you that it's essential to practice and blah, 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 and you think that sounds sort of lame, it's like, I get it. But honestly, down the road, if you really are passionate about it, then it will pay off if you practice. I've been practicing drum rudiments a lot lately because I need to play drum set for one of my college auditions for percussion, and just getting the technique down. It's been a pretty slow process, but I can definitely see the progress. It's slow, but just because I've sort of built up different techniques on different instruments over time, I know what it looks like. And if you're just starting out, it's understandable if you can't see that you're making any progress, and you might feel like giving up sometimes, but just trust yourself. Just let your hands take you there, or your voice, whatever instrument you're playing. If you just work on the technique, you will get better. Like, if you wait a year and then look at where you were a year ago, the chances are you will be a lot better, but that only happens if you practice.
All right, great. Thank you, Victor, for coming this week.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great having this discussion with you. So, guys, this has been The Passion Project. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, and also follow the WHS Tech Crew on Facebook at WHS Tech Crew, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at WHS_Tech Crew. Oh, also we're on Snapchat at WHS_Tech Crew. Thanks, and we'll see you guys next week.